Well, hello there everyone, welcome back to When Should a Beginner Upgrade Their Amp this time. I already did guitars. If you haven't checked that, I'll link that down below in the comments. If you want to check that out, you can. But we're going to go ahead and dive into this one. This is all about guitar amps. When should a beginner upgrade, a guitar amp, and just what guitar amps to upgrade to. I'll give you some options and stuff like that. But we're going to jump on in this one. Not really tabs. You can check out my free guitar course if you want to. It's linked down below. And the tones today will just be my gold top standard into, requested by you guys, the Brent Hines Terror that I have here. A lot of you have been asking me to use that amp more, so I was like, why not? And that's going into my two notes, and my computer's doing something crazy, so, well, what can we do? Alright, so number one is you need to figure out what kind of amp you have. Now, if you are the kind of person who started with a kit that came with, a guitar and amp and stuff like that, unfortunately, a lot of those starter amps are not the best. Typically, they have a very small speaker, which is already going to kind of make your tone sound thin and stuff like that. So I do recommend, kind of upgrading from that amp as soon as possible. The guitar, you can actually keep the starter guitar, maybe get it set up, but I feel like the amp can really, really hinder your playing because I have yet to come across one of those, kit amps that sound very good. There was a G-Deck at one point that didn't sound too bad. But other than that, most of them don't sound good. So if you do have one of those, I recommend whenever it's possible to upgrade your amp. Don't try to get pedals because pedals into those starter amps don't sound the best. So if you have one of those, I would upgrade that probably before you upgrade your guitar. Unfortunately, a nice guitar won't make a bad amp sound good. That bad amp will make that nice guitar just sound bad. And a good alternative could be maybe one of those Katana amps, or I've mentioned in here before, G-Decks I think are great amps. The little Joyo amps, I have some over here. A lot of that stuff that, the smaller amps are a little bit more money than those practice, starter kit amps, but they're so worth it. Amps have really come such a long way with those little amps sounding amazing nowadays. So maybe look into that stuff. Alright, so the next thing, maybe upgrading your amp. Maybe you already have one of those little Katana amps and stuff like that, but you're kind of in the phase of being a beginner where you're transitioning more, where you know some riffs, some solos, stuff like that, and maybe you've started a band. Well, this is a really, really good area to possibly upgrade. You need an amp that's going to fit the bill of what you're doing. Now, they make these lunchbox amps. I've actually used a 20-watt amp before in band practice, and it was loud enough if you play it through like a 2x12 or something like that, or a 4x12. It held up with drums and stuff like that. So maybe if you're not wanting to really, really like break the bank, the Orange makes some really great, smaller heads. It depends on how much you want to spend, essentially, on it. You can go the route. I have a buddy who's used the Fender Mustang, the larger ones, live, and he actually likes those. But if you're going to stay solid state, you really need to get a very high wattage amp. And if you go tube, you won't need as much, but there are just other complications that do come with a tube amp. Like you need a load on the amp if you're going to use it, so make sure you have speaker cables, all that kind of stuff, and a cabinet. But yeah, if you are going to be playing in a band or something, you probably need to upgrade your amp to either, if it's a solid state, a much higher wattage amp, or a tube amp. I wouldn't go below 20 watts. If you're getting a tube amp. It's always better to have more wattage than what you need than not enough. Now, another way that when is it a good time to upgrade an amp? Well, maybe you were inspired by some kind of amp. I think if you have consistently stuck with guitar and you're practicing all the time and wanting to play, and if maybe it's not over here, but maybe an Orange or a Marshall or Friedman, whatever it is, inspired you, You know, a lot of these amps have very signature looks. You know, like when you look at Marshall, you know that that's a Marshall. When you look at an Orange, you know that it's an Orange. Look at a Vox, you know, look at a Fender. A lot of these amps have very key looks, and maybe the person who inspired you to play, maybe it's Slash, you know. You are like, oh, he always had that wall of Marshalls behind him, or something like that. But, you know, whatever it is, you know, possibly upgrading to that amp can be a huge, huge lift, you know, of inspiration as a player. So that can also be a good time to upgrade if you know, feel confident that you're sticking with guitar and all that stuff. You know, upgrade to a style of amp that maybe you associate with guitar. So maybe that one can kind of help you out. Now, of course, with all of these things, you know, upgrade, you know, it'd be great if we could just upgrade whenever we wanted to. That'd be fantastic. But you know, obviously you need to make sure that the budget is there, and to figure out what kind of budget you're wanting to spend. You know, if you are entering into the world of tube amps, you are going to be spending, you know, usually significantly more for a, you know, a really nice tube amp, depending on how many wattage you want and who's making it and all that kind of stuff. You can typically get, you know, solid state amps. You know, they're usually significantly cheaper than a tube amp. You know, a tube amp has tubes and transformer, all these different things. Maybe solid state has transformers too. I don't know. I'm not an amp guy. But, you know, tube amps are just typically more expensive. And you just want to make sure that what you're getting into, if you have the budget available, and just kind of like make sure that you know a little bit about the amps, because when you're upgrading to something, you know, an amp, amps do a whole lot more typically than what a guitar does. Of course, depending on the guitar and the amp. The final one, I kind of hit on it a little bit earlier, but I thought I'd throw this in here, is if you are, you know, venturing past that very beginning stage, again, maybe you've got some riffs under your fingers, you're rocking out, maybe you're in a band now, stuff like that, but you're wanting to get into pedals. Now, you'll find, at least in my experience, I've played quite a few solid state amps in my day, and solid state amps just don't seem to take pedals the best. Maybe there's some out there. Maybe you guys can leave comments down on like a solid state amp that takes pedals really, really well. But I've always found pedals work the best with tube amps. So if you are turning into that pedal guy, that you want to be, you know, using all these different effects and pedals and distortions and all this kind of stuff, and pedals are fun. You know, I encourage it once you've got over those initial beginning hurdles of playing guitar. You know, maybe you want to look into some kind of a Fender, you know, combo amp or something like that. Something that's clean, or you could get something that's, you know, got some grit to it. But, you know, just look and see what people say about if the amp takes pedals well and stuff like that. Luckily, there's so much information out there. It's pretty easy to make, you know, a very well-educated, you know, conclusion about a product nowadays. And that's pretty much going to do it for us here today. So, hope that was helpful. I'm going to see if my computer is going to decide to work or not. Who knows what it's doing again. But other than that, I'm going to bounce on out of here. Peace out, homies. Keep on rocking. I'll see you again probably tomorrow. Can't get rid of me now, guys. I'm here forever. So I'll see you later. Peace out and rock on.